Welcome to today's training on assault awareness and prevention for transit operators. Assaults against bus operators are a real and growing problem in the public transportation industry. From physical assaults, including spitting, hitting, beating, stabbings, and things being thrown at the operator, to verbal abuse, including threats and intimidation. Bus operators are facing an epidemic of hostility while performing their duties. And we continue to hear about assault incidents on a more frequent basis, sadly, in the news and online. While there are more incidents reported, it doesn't mean that there's nothing that can be done about it. There are many simple and effective things we can do as bus operators to reduce the risk of assault incidents. The good news is that training is identified as an effective practice in reducing incidents of assaults and better equipping operators to address assaults when they do happen. As such, this course will focus on the skills and knowledge to help bus operators minimize potential conflicts to decrease the risk of an assault, to learn strategies and techniques to help present situations that can be addressed through assault prevention, and to provide opportunities to practice skills to de-escalate situations that could, in fact, result in assaults. If we are able to effectively prevent, minimize the risk of, and/or respond to assault incidents, we will become less vulnerable and better prepared in creating and maintaining a safer and more secure transit environment for ourselves, our customers, and the general public. The goal of this course is pretty simple. This course is designed for frontline bus operators, transportation supervisors, dispatchers, managers, and union representatives who work in the transit industry. The goal of this course is to give bus operators in the transit industry the knowledge and skills needed to reduce the likelihood of assault incidents from occurring. Here are the objectives of the course. In this training session, we will cover the following objectives. Define assault and identify operator assault incidents. Recognize key vulnerability factors. Practice communication and response skills to reduce potential conflicts. Discuss the value of reporting escalation of incidents to prevent future assaults. And review the importance of seeking assistance when assault incidents occur. There are 3 modules in the course, and here they are. The first module, Defining Assault and Recognizing Operator Vulnerability, covers the definition of assault and provides scenarios of different types of assaults. In the second module, Using Skills and Strategies to Prevent Operator Assaults, we will review and practice communication strategies and techniques to help reduce this assault risk. And finally, in the third module, Seeking Assistance, we will discuss the importance of reporting an assault if it occurs, and how you can help yourself and others recover from an incident. Periodically, we will ask for questions throughout the training session. Module 1, Defining Assault and Recognizing Operator Vulnerability. You can see operator assault statistics on this graph, and it should probably jump out at you as you look at it. as the reality that operator assaults since 2008 have been going up. And this is for both bus and rail operators. As we look up to the year 2020, we can see it's only in 2020 when assaults actually decreased dramatically, going down from previous years. And there may be a good reason for that, and I suspect you know what it is. Yes, there's been an upward trend. The numbers have never dropped for both bus and rail, but in 2020, the numbers dropped, and what we realize as we look at that is that was due to the limited level or lower level of service provided due to COVID-19. Here's a graphic illustration of operator assault injuries. Given the significant reduced ridership in 2020, we can tell that, you know, the reality is again that there have been concerns about assaults and injuries throughout this time period. However, if we calculate the rate of injuries, operator injuries per boarding, we see 2020 has the highest rate in the last 13 years. So clearly this has been a growing issue and still, sadly and unfortunately, is. We're all aware of the new face requirement. Implementing a new face mask requirement while ensuring the safety of transit operators is a top priority for transit agencies. On January 21, 2021, President Biden issued Executive Order 13998, promoting COVID-19 safety in domestic and international travel to save lives and allow all Americans, including the millions employed in the transportation industry, to travel and work safely. This executive order requires federal agencies to require masks be worn on public forms of transportation, including public transit. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention issued an order that went into effect on February 1, requiring conveyance operators, including transit agencies, to use their best efforts to ensure that people wear masks while boarding and disembarking a conveyance for the duration of a trip, and within a transportation hub as well. The Transportation Security Administration followed with a security directive implementing the CDC order. FTA, CDC, and TSA have published frequently asked questions, FAQs, and other resources to help transit agencies implement the federal mask requirement. Should you have questions about the federal mask requirement, please contact FTA at transitmaskup@dot.gov. Also, it is important that you refer to your transit agency for guidance on how this requirement is implemented within your system. I guess we should start by trying to define assault, and on the face of it, it seems like it might be a pretty clear definition, but there are implications that people are still trying to get their arms around to some degree. For the purpose of today, we will define assault as any physical act, harmful or offensive contact, verbal threat of bodily harm, or attempt to cause injury or bodily harm by one person towards another. So that's the classic definition of assault that we will be using throughout this training. Are there any questions before we go on to our first learning activity?
Participants can submit any questions they have into the host chat. Okay, Reem, it looks like we do have one question.
Okay.
And that is, so you're saying they don't actually have to hit me, they could just threaten?
Yes, that's what we're saying. And the reality is you have to have a sense that someone is threatening you with bodily harm. That doesn't mean they have to have hit you, but that they are doing something that potentially threatens you. An example, which is not as far-fetched as it may seem, if somebody leans over and purposely coughs in your face while leaning over towards you, that would potentially lead you to think that this was an assault. It's the intent as well as the act.
All right, thanks, Reem. That is, we have no more questions.
Okay. Why don't you lead us into a learning activity, Andy?
All right, thanks, Reem. Good afternoon, everyone. What we're going to do now is move into our first learning activity of the day. And we're going to try to measure our understanding of that definition of assault that Reem just took us through. And the way that we're going to do this is we're actually going to present several scenarios or examples. And I'm going to ask our participants today to use a simple poll that we'll put up to let us know whether or not you think this example represents an operator assault incident. So let's get started. So in our first example, we have a passenger and you repeatedly ask them to change seats for another passenger who has a disability, but this first passenger refuses. Now, after your last request, he curses at you and he punches you in the face as he exits the vehicle. So this may seem like a pretty obvious answer. What we'd like to do is to get our participants, we'll put a poll up on the screen right now for you. And if you could select either yes or no as to whether or not you think this is an accurate representation of an operator assault incident. All right, I see a lot of answers coming in quickly. And yes, everyone is in agreement that this indeed is an operator assault. Thank you very much for your engagement. Now let's move on to our next example. Okay, in scenario number 2, we have a customer that is angry because the bus is late again. Now, as you try to explain why the bus is behind schedule, this passenger spits at you, turns around, and walks away. All right, so based on this scenario, you could enter in through the poll whether or not you think this is an operator assault incident. All right, I see our responses coming in. Once again, we have consensus. Yes, this indeed is an operator assault incident. Very good. Okay, now let's move on to our third scenario. And in this situation, we have a passenger that gets upset because you won't stop the bus at an unscheduled stop. Now, when you do stop the bus at the next scheduled stop, this passenger on her way off the bus intentionally strikes you on the arm with her purse as she exits the vehicle. So once again, if you could use your poll and let us know with a yes or a no, whether or not this represents operator assault. Okay, excellent. See the responses flying in. And again, we do have consensus. And yes, this is an example of operator assault. All right, so thank you all very much for your participation. And with that, I'm going to hand the microphone back over to Reem for the next part of our presentation.
Thank you, Andy. What we'd like to look at now is frequency of assault incidents. I found this very interesting in my 40 years of transit, safety and security. I've heard of every kind of assault I think imaginable, but I really had never seen a breakdown of this type. And let's walk through this breakdown because I think we can learn something from it. We can probably agree that all the scenarios that you just went through constituted some form of degree of assault because they either show some form of physical assault, harmful or offensive contact, or verbal threat. This slide relates the frequency that an incident occurs to the type of incident. The percentages are based on survey results, what each responding agency in the survey considered problematic, quote unquote, assault types. Assaults against bus operators are not counted specifically by any federal agency, by the way. The most frequent incidents are verbal threats, intimidation, or harassment. This result mirrors those of workplace violence studies that indicate that verbal attacks are the most common form of workplace violence. And this probably doesn't surprise any of you. However, the next most frequent assault type was spitting. Although seemingly minor, being spat upon can be traumatic to the victim. And this is particularly true, obviously, when we are in the midst of a pandemic. Also, because aggravated assaults that result in physical injuries can be preceded by minor assaults, even minor incidents need to be reported and closely monitored. What I'm suggesting here is a minor incident can often lead to a major incident. So nothing is too minor to be reported. As incidents cause more physical damage, they are also less frequent. And that's obviously a good thing. Fewer agencies report assaults involving items thrown at the bus and items thrown inside the bus. As you can see, 2% of assaults involved weapons. Obviously, that's an extraordinarily dangerous situation and one that can have incredibly terrible consequences. So why are you at risk? I guess we should take a look at this because it kind of speaks to the bus operator and the situations that they find themselves in. And, there is no doubt, and let me say this on the front end, that bus operators have an extraordinarily challenging job. And, there's some reasons that those challenges include risk, and we'll look at some of them now. Bus operators are at risk, one, because they work alone, work in small groups, or work late at night and early in the morning. And, that seems fairly logical, working alone and working at night in the early morning. And that when you're out there solo, that can be certainly a stressful situation. Second, they have fair and policy enforcement responsibilities. Throughout the history of me working in safety and security, and by the way, I worked at DC Metro, New Jersey Transit, and Utah Transit, and have worked throughout actually with transit agencies all over the country, and worked with the Federal Transit Administration on their voluntary bus safety and security program, which addressed assault issues. Up until recently, fair conflict was the primary, cause or the catalyst for assaults. Now we've got the issue of enforcement of other regulations, and obviously including the mask regulation. Third, because bus operators deal and interact with the public, it's simple as that. And they don't know really exactly who they're going to be dealing with at any given moment of time. That can create threat situations because they have mobile workplaces. And their workplace is their vehicle. And you see a picture of a coach there, but keep in mind that workplace could be a cutaway body on chassis vehicle or even a van. But they're mobile regardless of the type of vehicle. Because bus operators work in public settings and communities. So whatever's going on within the community inevitably finds its way onto the transit vehicle. And therefore, to some degree, the bus operators are, not only dealing with their job, but they're dealing with whatever issues are percolating within the community. And finally, because they transport passengers. And that's what their job is, to transport passengers. And a vast, vast majority of those passengers are appreciative of the service they get and appreciative of what the bus operator does to get them from point A to point B safely. But occasionally, as we know, that passenger group can include people who have other issues and other agendas. So, in addition to work environment, the bus or vehicle contributes to vulnerability of operator assaults because it's open and it's accessible by many people. Pretty obvious stuff, right? Let's look now, if we could, at situational awareness. This is really an important concept when you're looking at assault awareness and prevention, and that is the bus operator really needs to stay aware of the situation that they find themselves in, and they need to be cognizant of issues like the ones that you see in the bullets on the screen. When we address these issues in subsequent slides, hopefully they will come alive for you in terms of their impact. Basically, situational awareness involves taking in information about the environment, the time of day, the behaviors of people, the number of people that you're interacting with, and obviously your location within the service area. These slides will cover situational awareness in terms of environment, time of day, passenger interactions, and emotions and behaviors. So let's launch into that now. Let's first talk about awareness of the environment. Some examples of environmental issues that a bus operator would want to be aware of are, certainly not limited to, but are, construction and traffic causing service delay. If there are construction or traffic delays, that not only makes the bus operator's job harder in terms of operating the vehicle itself safely, but it tends to make passengers less comfortable, more likely to complain or get irritated, and generally has the possibility of causing increased hostility toward the bus operator and blaming the bus operator for the delays caused by issues the bus operator had no control of. Special events can be an environmental issue of concern. I went to college on the GI Bill, and my first job out of college at the end of the 70s was at the DC Metro system. And in DC, there was endless events, as I'm sure you're well aware of. And, and obviously that's even becoming increasingly so of late. So rowdy crowds, crowded buses during an event can definitely alter the mood and have the potential domino effect on putting into play uncontrollable situations. For example, after the San Francisco Giants won the World Series, vandals lit a San Francisco Muni bus on fire. Another example occurred when Chicago CTA buses were rerouted because of the Lollapalooza festival, but the changes of the reroutes were not posted along the route. And even many of the bus operators themselves weren't aware of the changes. passengers were very angry about all this, and they took their anger out on operators because of long wait times or even total lack of service to where they wanted to get to. High crime areas is obviously an environmental concern. Unfortunately, we have certain areas of our community that have higher levels of crime. And this has the potential to, transfer itself onto a transit vehicle. So if a neighborhood has gang-related activity, it may make the bus operator more vulnerable to an incident. Let's take a look at time of day. Again, I found this data, it makes sense to me in my experience, but on the other hand, it's more empirical, and I found this really interesting when I first saw this information. This is about what time of day might an operator find themselves most vulnerable to incidents. There was a survey done of transit properties across the country, and the results of this survey showed these times as most and least vulnerable. 1, most vulnerable. 48% in the survey agreed that the most vulnerable time is during the evening, late evening, early morning time periods. It only makes sense, right? But if you've never had this job or haven't been, close to someone who does have this job, you know how isolated you can feel operating a bus at 2 a.m. in an urban area. So the reality is, it isn't surprising where people feel most vulnerable, and that is evening, late night, and early morning. Second was during the PM peak period. 38% of folks felt that this was the time period where they felt most vulnerable. The reality here is that, that peak period is people are off work. You have other people who are, not everybody's off work, obviously, but you have people getting off work, mixing with people who are, doing other kinds of things. You often had very crowded vehicles, and tempers can flare, and small incidents can grow into larger and more threatening kinds of incidents. Third time is school dismissal, and that was 28%. Now, I know that this only applies to transit agencies that actually provide school-related service. There are many systems that don't do that, so this wouldn't be nearly as much of a concern. But school dismissal times, when kids are getting out of school, can have the potential to be a threatening experience for a bus operator. And you've got, particularly teenagers, who really want to demonstrate their will, who tends to get rowdy, who want to show off, and all these kinds of things can lend themselves to incidents on a vehicle between an operator and a young passenger. Another time is during school runs, and that was 12%. And that's actually, getting kids to school and, taking, kids from school. This is where you have service that's really focused on school-related activities, and that was about 12%. And a lot of that is just young people's energy on the bus. And it's not just conflict with the bus operator and school service, in my experience. A lot of it is the operator has to deal with conflict between the kids. In the morning AM peak period, it was only 8% as a concerning time. And I think the reason is obvious. People are usually normally going to their destination, going to work, and they in most cases, they are probably, less likely to be under the influence of something, less likely to be in sort of a mood set that, could lead to incidents. They just simply want to get where they're going as quickly as possible. And the least vulnerable time is the midday time frame, and that's probably because that's when there are fewer people actually using this transit services, and those who do don't tend to be the people who are perpetrators of violence. So, there's no absolutes here, y'all, but this I think is rather interesting information. But there's one statistic that you don't see on the screen, and that statistic is the fact that 33% of the responding agencies indicated that there was no real pattern at all to when incidents occurred. So, in other words, what they were suggesting, these agencies, a third of the responders, that we can't break it into patterns because, bad stuff happens any time of the day. Passenger contact. Obviously, what we're talking about here is the interaction, if you will, between the operator and the passenger. So it's important that we don't just focus on the time of day for factors that increase likelihood of operator assault incidents, that we look at other factors as well. And one of those other factors, important one, is the type of passenger contact or interaction which makes the bus operator more vulnerable to assault incidents. In this regard, there are contributing factors when interacting with passengers may trigger an increased risk of assault incidents. So it's not just having the incident, but the interaction actually generating the incident. And these primary factors include, and I've talked about this already, and a big one is fare enforcement and disputes. Maybe fares have been increased. It might be about transfer policies. It might be about people just not wanting to pay a fare and ride without paying. So this could be a real issue. And one of the things that, we want to make sure our bus operators understand that there's a limit to how far they're going to enforce fare requirements. They don't want to exceed that limit and find themselves in dangerous situations. And I think every transit agency tries to make that clear. And then there's rule enforcement, taking food and beverages on the vehicle, safety, seating requirements, and now mask requirements. Bus operators, feeling, they have to enforce mask requirements. And there's a lot of concern in the industry about, that activity of enforcing mask requirements generating a situation that could lead to conflict and assaults. I talked about school or youth related violence earlier, and that's been an ongoing top issue, and probably will always continue to be. Individuals with mental illness, if folks have, mental issues, those mental issues could, in and of themselves, generate response to a situation that really isn't, a situation that needed to be responded to. In other words, an individual may create the conflict in their own mind and then act out on that creation. Well, obviously, in peak periods, when we've cut back on service, as we move forward out of the pandemic, which we all hope we will, overcrowding, on buses may become an increasing issue. And when folks are crowded on buses, people are in close contact with each other, often have to stand, and people, become more irritable as a result of that. Service problems. I mean, the delays, service reduction, those kinds of things make it more difficult for people who rely on transit to get where they need to go, and cause irritability, and sort of create an environment of potential conflict. And of course, passengers under the influence of alcohol or drugs. Standard strategies for de-escalating violence, at least in my experience, are not particularly effective for folks who are under the influence of alcohol and drugs. So operators really need to be careful about that interaction and to watch if it's moving quickly towards a danger point, and then to follow system policy to respond to that danger. Let's take a look. This is important stuff, I think. Awareness of emotions and behaviors. It's another factor that potentially increases vulnerability. And that's the type of emotion and behavior a passenger shows. Passenger emotions, especially if they increase in intensity, can increase the likelihood of confrontations and make it difficult for people to actually even listen to each other. Let's take a look at these different levels of behavior, moving from the left to the right on the screen to the most benign, if you will, to the most dangerous. Start with confusion. Confusion is when a person, we're assuming a passenger, appears bewildered, distracted, and is unsure of the next course of action they should take. Let's take a transit example of that. Confusion might involve a passenger who appears to be unsure if they're on the right bus, who repeatedly asks for directions and information about how to transfer to another bus, or a person who's really uncertain how to read a route map. That person is confused. They feel somewhat embarrassed by that confusion, perhaps, and so they have a stress that they're carrying with them, which has the potential to generate a higher level of conflict. Second one is frustration. People may be impatient with the operator, and they may resist or challenge information the operator gives them, or they may vent their dissatisfaction with the transit agency on the operator. For example, a passenger who disagrees with a bus policy repeatedly vents frustration at a change in route schedules, or makes aggravating comments just to get under the operator's skin and push their hot buttons. In other words, they're taking out their own frustration, if you will, not just on the transit agency, but perhaps in life on the bus operator. Next one is blame. This is where a person accuses or holds responsible the operator for delays in service that was not their fault, or blames them for personal problems they are having unrelated to transit services. For example, construction on the route bus has been causing delays, but the passenger blames that tardiness on the operator and insists it's because the operator doesn't know how to drive in traffic. Think about that. That kind of transference of blame. And, that's something that a lot of folks just do throughout their life. They find fault with others. And if you're a bus operator and you're being attacked for issues that you have no control of, and you're being told it's because you're poor at your job, it's pretty hard to keep your own anger under control, which moves us to anger. This is where people show visible, physical or verbal signs of fury or rage. Example might include yelling or shouting at the operator, pointing fingers at the operator, shaking fists at the operator, or demonstrating some other high level of anger. This, folks, we've moved to the level of very risky behavior, because if someone is at that level of anger, it doesn't take much to transfer that anger into an assault situation. The highest level of emotions and behaviors that cause danger is hostility. Now, I will say that it's maybe hard to separate anger and hostility, but hostility is where a person shows out of control behavior or is carrying out physical actions or threats of physical harm that appears like they're going to be happening like right now. In other words, they're putting out signals that they are going to act in a way that potentially puts in danger the lives of the operator, other passengers, or at the very least, damage of property. Oh, we forget to mention? The operator also has to drive that bus. They're dealing with all this stuff, and they still have to drive the bus. And they still have the responsibility for all those lives on the bus and outside the bus. They have to deal with constructions and detours and traffic jams and pedestrians and bicyclists and distracted whatever. That means they have to pay attention as well to passengers waiting to get picked up, to driving rules, to detours, and every other hazard imaginable out there in their service area. I had an experience actually that I think is relative to this, and that is, when I first started at WMATA, I was in actually rail operations, safety and training, and I was involved in the training of new bus operators, new rail operators. And this was the beginning of, the red line service at the end of the 70s. And people were bidding over from bus to rail to no longer be a bus operator, to move to these now open rail operator positions. And I used to get small groups and, take them through my part of the training. And I'd always ask the question, so why would you want to leave bus operations when you have 10, 15, even 20 years of experience and move over to a brand new job as a rail operator? And to a person, they answered one way or another, because I can close the operator compartment door, and because I will be operating a vehicle on a fixed guideway. Get the message? They were just burnt out from dealing with passenger issues and the issues outside of their vehicle in, the service area, and other automobiles and trucks and people and bicyclists and blah, blah, blah. That was the reason. It kind of says it all. So, in summary, assaults, when defined broadly, may include both physical and verbal threats of harm or bodily injury. And although there are a variety of environmental factors that may increase our vulnerability to assault incidents, more oftentimes the contributing factors that trigger the potential risk of an operator assault are things around fare disputes, rule enforcements, and service problems. Therefore, prevention strategies and techniques utilized by bus operators during these interactions will be important to protect against and/or reduce the risk of operator assaults. In the next module, we will discuss a variety of practices and prevention strategies to protect bus operators from assaults in vulnerable situations. I want you to look at those techniques that we're going to talk about as tools in the toolbox. And this section of the training, hopefully, will either give you, the participant in the training, new ideas or help sharpen your existing skills. So, do you have any questions at this point before we move on? If so, please let us know through the chat box.
Thank you to our participants. And again, if you have any questions, please enter them into the chat box. Okay, Riemann, we do have a question.
Okay.
And it doesn't seem like there's a difference between angry and hostile.
Yeah. And I sort of alluded to that when I was talking about it, and I would agree with that, by the way, the thrust of that question. It is fairly subtle. But what we're trying to say again is anger is, in fact, when somebody is angry and are verbally and non-verbally demonstrating that anger with fists, with fingers, with loud voices, with whatever. Hostility is the next level beyond anger because they're not only demonstrating their anger, but they're giving out indicators that there is an imminent possibility of physical assault. So they're not just ticked off, they're also giving out indicators that they're about to do something drastic in terms of assault behavior. So that's the difference. Subtle though it may be, it can be an important differentiation in how the bus operator reacts. Back to you, Andy.
Thank you, Reem, and thanks again to our participants. And at this time, we want to get started with our second learning activity of the day. Now, the purpose of this activity, again, it's going to be scenario-based. And we're going to look at two scenarios. And what we want to do is to try to evaluate the emotional state or the emotional level of the passenger in each of these scenarios. And again, we're going to be using those 5 emotional levels that Reem just walked through for us. So let's get started with our first scenario. Okay, in this first example, a passenger gets on your bus. He has an all-day pass. Now, as you pull away from the curb, the passenger asks you if you're headed towards Rose Avenue. And you tell him, actually, Rose Avenue's in the other direction. So at this point, he realizes he's going in the wrong way, and he asks you if you can stop the bus so he can get off. Now, at this point, traffic is heavy around you. The shoulders are very narrow. You have very little space to pull over. And the passenger seems pretty nervous, and he keeps kind of rubbing the edge of his card, demonstrating his nervousness. So what we'd like participants to do at this time is we're going to put up a poll. And if you could select from the 5 emotional states we have presented in the poll: confused, frustrated, blaming someone, angry, or hostile, to let us know what you think the state is of this individual. All right, I see some results coming in now. Thank you again for your engagement. And excellent. Okay, and it looks like the majority of our participants say that the individual is confused. And we do have some people that say that he's frustrated. And I think we would agree that both of these states probably reflect the situation of this individual. And we had pre-populated this as being confused. But as with a lot of these categories, sometimes the real situation could blur the lines between 2 of these categories. So it's a really good example. And another thing we want to start thinking about are what we do in response to these emotional states that we assess in our passengers. Right? And something consistently that we'll want to think about is staying calm, very cool responses, making sure to check our tone of our voice when we're speaking to them, also thinking about things like our body language. And again, right, the goal here is that we don't want to do anything in communicating with this passenger that would help escalate this situation and move someone maybe from beyond fused to frustrated or to angry or hopefully not to a hostile state. And so with that, let's go to our next example. And in scenario 2, we have a situation: 2 folks get on board our bus at the local mall. Now, one of them swipes her fare card, but doesn't pay for her friend that's with her, the second woman. Now, at the end of the ride, you say to the second woman, all riders need to pay the fare. And at this point, she begins arguing with you, stating that her friend paid for her. Now, at this point, both women begin arguing with you, and they insist that the fare was paid for both of them. Okay, so thinking about this scenario, if we could have participants complete their poll and let us know what they think the emotional state of the individual is. Okay, getting great responses in. All right, and there we go. And excellent. And we have some multiple answers here. We have blaming someone, we have angry. And again, I think in both of these situations, I mean, in this specific scenario, both of those categorizations definitely would be accurate in defining this individual state. Of course, we have pre-populated this as angry, right? Due to the verbal arguing with you and insistence that the fare was paid. And so, but again, as we mentioned before, that might not be about accurately bucketing something into one specific category. But I think a lot of the importance is the fact that we're assessing their state in general so that we can begin to think about strategies that will help us defuse the situation. And of course, once again, like the examples we said in our previous scenario, the importance of staying calm, using cool responses, right? Watching our tone of voice, watching our own body language to make sure that our input into the interaction does not serve to escalate. And hopefully we use strategies that are going to help us de-escalate. And again, in the content that Reem's going to present momentarily, we're going to dig in a little bit deeper on these specific strategies and how to apply them based on these assessments that we're making about our passengers' emotional levels. So I want to thank everybody again for your engagement. And I'll be talking with you momentarily when we get to our third learning activity. But for now, I'm going to pass the microphone back to Reem. Reem, it's all yours.
Hey, thanks so much, Andy. Appreciate it. In Module 2, we're going to look at using skills and strategies to prevent assaults. This is where the rubber hits the road, really. This is de-escalation skills, if you will. In this module, we will be discussing what operators can do to be as prepared as possible for preventing and/or reducing assault incidents. I just want to say in the front end, and I'm sure you're well aware of this much more than I perhaps, that not these are proven skills in terms of have shown to be effective, but there is no foolproof de-escalation. And at some point, you have to decide if you're practicing the skills and strategies we're going to talk about, decide if they're working. And if they're not, and the situation is continuing to escalate, you're moving into the danger zone. And at that point, you're going to respond accordingly. Will these strategies prevent every assault? The answer is no. Not as much as someone can prepare. There will be situations that can't be prevented for many reasons. But what we're talking about here is in this module, we're going to give you, quote unquote, a toolbox of techniques, a bag of tricks, if you will, to help reduce the tension surrounding an interaction. And so it'll be up to you to assess the interaction and select which skill or strategy best fits the interaction. By the way, I just want to make it clear, this course will not cover self-defense strategies, since self-defense is dependent on your own agency-specific policies. You are a professional. I cannot tell you how much respect I have for individuals who made a career being a bus operator or in bus operations. You've worked hard to get your license. You've taken, God knows, lots of training. And you probably have the right personality to do what you do on top of your technical skills and defensive driving and passenger assistance and other kinds of issues. So here's some points for you to consider as you project and as you maintain your professional manner, which I think is extremely important, I suspect, to each of you. First, your project knowledge. You're the first point of contact a passenger has with your agency when they get on that bus. So it's important for you to be familiar with agency policies and procedures and to know what is within your power to enforce and what is not within your power to enforce. And those are things that will be very helpful to you in knowing that as you try to de-escalate conflict. Your knowledge will help give you the information that a passenger in a way, to a passenger in a way that doesn't create conflict, hopefully. And your goal is to give that information based on your knowledge in a way that lowers the risk of conflict in that communication. Showing confidence. I'm sure it's an important part of your pride, but showing confidence when you can appreciate your abilities and qualities is really important as you deal with passenger interaction. There's a big difference between confidence and arrogance, but you can show confidence, and should, in the way you handle the bus, negotiate traffic, and interact with passengers. And finally, as a professional, I know you know this extraordinarily well, or you couldn't possibly survive in the job you're in, but you've got to respect differences. You obviously can't act on stereotypical beliefs and assumptions. Sensitivity, tolerance, respect for others' differences play a key role in maintaining control of how effectively your interaction with others on a bus is going to be, as well as more broadly in life in general. So, I'm going to talk here a little in the next couple slides about responding versus reacting. If a passenger shows any warning signs of escalating behavior, it's going to require, or at least potentially going to require, a response from you, the bus operator. So passenger behavior usually drives this response that you are going to have to make. And you might end up feeling the freeze, fight, or flight reaction, especially when everyone's emotions are mixed in. The point is, it will be critical for you to resist the urge to fight. Whether you respond or react will make a difference in the outcome of the interaction. And fight is not going to get you where you need to go. So, respond versus react. What's the difference? Let's look at some differences here, and I'll try to explain their importance. Responding is a conscious action. Responding is when you are aware of your surroundings and the situation you're in, and you take all that into consideration. Reacting, on the other hand, is an unconscious action. It's when you are not aware of your surroundings. You're not thinking about that. You're not aware of your senses or your thoughts. You are just reacting. Reacting is going to lead you down a very rough road in potential conflict situations. What about thought out strategy versus random strategy? Responding means putting into place the actions you've already thought out, maybe not at that particular moment, but throughout the day or your career, but that you've already thought out. On the other hand, reacting means that you're going to do something that is random. It's not built on a thought out strategy. You're going to roll the dice and just do something. And when we react randomly, sometimes it'll work. Sometimes you hit the nail on the head, but more often than not, you may be ignoring a situation or ignoring factors within the situation that could be dangerous, to say the least. You can ignore a situation one day and you can get mad the next, but it's best to have a thought out strategy as you go into the situation itself. Being prepared versus unprepared. Responding, like everything else in life to some degree, requires preparation. So you can use the skills and strategy to solve the problems or defuse the situation. Reacting, on the other hand, is basically a sign of lack of preparation and lack of control. I'm just going to react. I'm just going to react to this situation. Maybe sometimes that'll work out. And you know what? Maybe the next time you do it, it doesn't work out at all because there is no planned action that you have prepared for. Emotions. In a response mode, emotions are kept under control because you are under control. In a reactive mode, both your emotional and physical state can get overexcited. And your mind won't think properly. And you just start doing stuff. And sometimes that stuff creates an environment of danger for you and others. We know you have to listen to a variety of excuses and explanations and have to deal with passenger behavior on a daily basis. And God knows that's a challenge. But it's what makes you good at your job that you can handle it. And you deserve, and don't get nearly as much, the congratulations every day on what you do. However, you're a human being. And you might get to the point where you just feel tired of taking it on the chin. And you're starting to feel, I'm going to fight back. I'm tired of taking this stuff. Resist that reaction because it may lead you down a road you do not want to go down. As you become more tolerant of others and prevent yourself from overreacting, the better chance you have for diffusing any situation, avoiding more serious outcomes, and in fact, going home at the end of the day happy. So be careful of your response. You should see on these slides that escalating level, confusion, frustration, blame, anger, hostility. Always when you're carving out responses, you want to keep that in mind. Of course, however, as a human being, you're not a robot. As a human being, you've got your own emotions, and you do, in fact, have to respond to situations. However, if your hot buttons have been pushed, if your emotions are running hot, it might cause you to over-respond to a situation. And over-responding to a situation has disaster potential written all over it. An example might be that a passenger boards the bus and frustrated because the card reader isn't accepting her card. It's probably the 20th time this has happened that day. You're tired of it. It's irritating to you. But if you respond with an angry or frustrated tone of voice, it could contribute to the passenger getting more emotional, getting more frustrated with you. On the other hand, if you respond using a calm tone of voice, you have the ability to keep the interaction on the lower level, lower end of the emotional range, because you don't want to move it up to anger and hostility. That's for sure. So, easy for me to sit here and say, y'all, stay cool, calm, and collected. I'm not out there in your seat every day. You are. But it is important for me, if I'm going to do my job here in this training, to at least talk about and make the argument for it. So what can you do about this? First, you can identify your hot buttons. There are many things that a passenger says or does that can be irritating. If you know what those hot buttons are, if you know your hot buttons, then you can begin to develop strategies to overcome your reactions if someone pushes those buttons. For your own sake, this isn't just good customer service, for your own sake, emotional and physical well-being. Don't let the passenger's actions make you lose self-control if you possibly can help it. When a passenger irritates you or hits your hot buttons, don't take the bait. You're the one who benefits by that strategy. Don't take the bait. Practice positive self-talk strategies. Talk to yourself. Self-talk refers to the things we say to ourselves, our conscious and rational thoughts that we use to calm ourselves down and maintain self-control. Simply put, self-talk reminds us of how we should react and behave in a variety of situations. For example, remind yourself that it takes two to argue. Or say to yourself, I'm not going to sink to that level. Or how about saying to yourself, I can be the adult in the room here and remain professional in the situation, even if they are not. Another example is to remind yourself, this person isn't upset with me. I can't take this personally. They're upset about the service being late. They're upset about the agency rules. They're upset about personal issues in their lives, and I can't take it personally myself. Remember, with self-talk, you're always reminding yourself how you should react in the situation, how you shouldn't react in a way that adds fuel to the fire, potentially escalates the situation that could result in a potential assault. Self-talk, you guys. Hey, let it go, man. Sometimes the best communication means not really communicating, especially if it means that you will avoid confrontation. A conflict with a difficult person often can be diffused if you choose to let it go. Keep in mind that avoidance of a situation is different from denial. Avoidance is different from denial. It's not the same thing. So what is avoidance? Avoidance is a calculated strategy for dealing with the irate or angry person. You've thought about the situation, and based on your experience, your perceptions, have decided not to take any actions because it'd be safer for you to let it go. Avoidance doesn't mean ignoring a person or a safety hazard. It means letting it go because there is nothing to be gained by focusing on it. Denial, however, means that you refuse to acknowledge that the situation even exists. And what can be the result of that? Your denial could actually make the situation worse. If I don't think it's going on, I'm not going to be, in some way or another responding to it, and it burns like a wildfire. Denial is different from avoidance. Avoidance is a thought-out strategy. So consciously avoiding a confrontation with an upset passenger is a thought-out strategy, where denial is a blind reaction. Now, I've got to say, and you've got to think, I'm sure, and know through experience, there are certain circumstances where avoidance will not be effective. Here's some guidelines for when to use and not to use avoidance in a situation. So when is it appropriate to use avoidance as a strategy? It's appropriate to avoid a confrontation when you feel that the issue is minor or inconsequential, and a further confrontation on that issue would result in an escalation of the situation. In other words, you're making a calculated decision that this issue isn't big enough for me to begin addressing, so I'm going to let it go, and I'm going to avoid addressing it in a confrontational way. However, sometimes it's not appropriate to avoid a situation. You should not use avoidance when the issue is important, when the issue needs to be addressed, when there are time constraints involved, when there's a potential for conflict to quickly escalate, when the difficult person continues to force the issue, or there is a policy violation. Examples include the customer trying to sneak a gas can on board the bus during rush hour, opening up a can of beer and drinking in the back of the bus. You can't avoid it. Safety rules and regulations never should be compromised, and you know that. Take a mental time out. Give yourself time to think about the situation. Say, give me a minute. I'll get you the information you need. Hey, I need a minute to think about how we can work this out. Take a mental time out, because especially if you feel yourself getting angry, you need to take a deep breath. Let the passenger know that you're working on a situation, but need a little time. It will also give you time to think more carefully on how to handle the situation you're faced with and to use the strategies you've learned in this training session. Body language, nonverbals. Let's kind of look at communication broadly and talk about how communication occurs. Talk about, spoken word, tone of voice, body language. Body language is a major part of how people communicate. Our key is to be aware of how nonverbal communication affects the interaction you have. Why? Because only 7% of communication is actually spoken words. Think about that. The words you say or somebody says to you is only 7% factor in the overall communication that's going on between the two of you. 38% of that communication is the tone of voice someone is using, how they say the words, loud, soft, sarcastically, afraid, whatever that tone of voice is. The other person is going to pick up on that in a much bigger way than the actual words themselves. And then, apart from spoken language, the tone of voice you use to say them, over half, 55% of communication is nonverbal. What you look like when you're communicating, your body language. Why is this important to know? Because passengers will be watching you and interpreting what you didn't say as well as what you did. The way you and your passengers look at each other, move, and hold your bodies can influence whether an issue will escalate or diffuse. And I'm not just talking here, y'all, about your body language, but it's about you being aware of the body language, the nonverbals of passengers who you may be having some concern about. So what the science of nonverbals include is body position can be open or closed. Open position involves keeping the body open. Generally, hands at your sides indicates friendliness and willingness by keeping it open. A closed posture, on the other hand, involves keeping the body hunched over, crossed arms or legs, and indicates hostility, unfriendliness. Gestures include how you move your hands, pointing, palms up, hands folded in lap, tightly fisted. Head, nodding, shaking, looking down, looking away, quizzical, etc. Feet can be crossed or tapping, moving up and down legs. And body, crossing arms or legs, hands on hips, hands clasped behind back, tapping fingers, fidgeting. These are all nonverbals that you need to be aware of in yourself and others, because that's how communication happens. Expressions convey your emotions, so keeping your emotions Under control is essential because you will express them non-verbally if you aren't able to keep them under control. I'm talking about like happiness, sadness, fear, surprise, anger, disgust, all those kinds of things. Okay. Check your tone of voice. This is stuff you know. I mean, I understand that. I'm not, opening the sky for you here. But there's things that we often lose track of, that we forget. We get caught up in the moment and we aren't thinking about those nonverbals. We aren't thinking about the tone of voice. If you take a step back and think about it, you get it. But when we get caught up in the moment, we often don't get it. And that's when we walk ourselves right into trouble. Tone of voice means how you say something, not what you say. Not the actual words, it's how you say it. You can raise and lower your voice to emphasize certain words or points. What we're concerned about is keep your voice relaxed and your level of emotion low. Keeping the tension out of your voice will help you sound gentle and pleasant, hopefully. Your body posture will help with this too. Keep your upper body, shoulders, neck, abdominal muscles relaxed, and that will change your voice, believe it or not. If you relax yourself, it's actually going to have an effect on your voice. And if you've ever done any meditation, it's not about this topic, obviously, but you know what it means to relax upper body, shoulders, neck, abdominal muscles. Adjust the volume. Part of your tone comes from how loud you talk. And there's times you got to talk loud because of road noise. Passengers talk on the bus, a lot of people talking, sounds on the bus. So, but be aware of how your volume affects the passenger. And remember, this is just, scientifically proven. Lowering your voice can actually cause the passenger to calm down and listen. Whereas a loud voice can place emphasis on the situation, and a combination of matching the loudness to that of the passenger and then moving to a softer tone can really help bring the conversation under control. Listen and repeat key points. Assault prevention strategies also include traditional communication techniques. So what do you think is the most important part of communication? It's listening. It's listening. Using listening skills to communicate, you're trying to communicate through listening skills, understanding. And it's a tool to help you develop a positive rapport with passengers. When you're listening, you're making sure that you fully understand what the problem is, to first off, and you're helping to filter out unnecessary information in regard to solving that problem. If the bus was late and the passenger is swearing while telling you they'll be late for work, the only important information in that conversation that you listen for is late for work, not the other stuff. When we have a clear message, we can respond appropriately. The first step in using listening skills is to repeat the key points. Repeat the key points. Or put into words what you think the person is telling you or requesting. Here's a few good starting points. Let me be sure I heard what you just said. Let me be sure I heard that. Let me be sure we're on the same wavelength. Let me be sure I understand you. And there are many reasons why repeating key points is powerful. Most passengers will actually let you interrupt when you request them to repeat key points. You've gained control. You're talking and he or she is listening. You're making sure you know what was said so there's no misunderstanding. You're actually giving the person a chance to correct you. You're helping make the other person listen, and they want to listen, and guess why? Because it's all about them. And we all like it to be all about us, don't we? And you set up the rules of the game because you gave a calm response. In likelihood, your calm response and in listening, you'll get a calm or at least calmer response back. And if you don't, and it continues to escalate, you need to be really aware of the possibility you're on a significant path to danger. Acknowledge the other person's feelings. Show interest in what the other person is feeling. Show your concern about what they're feeling. What you're doing is you're letting the passenger know that you understand his or her emotional state without agreeing with or condoning his or her behavior. It's an easy way to do this. Well, that's a lie. It's not easy to do at all. But a way to do this is I think you're feeling whatever that emotion is because of what you're going through, whatever they are going through. You're feeling blank because of blank. Here's some examples of knowledge, acknowledging person's feelings. You know, I can see you are really confused about the schedule change. You seem to be very frustrated about this issue. It looks to me like you're really annoyed. I guess this increase in fare has upset you quite a bit, huh? Sounds to me like you're tired of getting the runaround. I'm sure glad you shared that information with me because you seem real aggravated. You know, I bet that was disgusting to go through. Boy, it sure sounds frustrating to me. Keep in mind that when answering your questions, the upset passenger may make accusatory and or critical statements about you and your agency. Don't take the bait by taking any of that personally. It's about what's inside them. It's about, bigger service issues, agency policy issues. It ain't about you. Don't take the bait. There's nothing positive that's going to come out of taking the bait. Ask open-ended questions. Ask questions to gather information. And answer questions that require the passenger to think rather than react. Answering those questions that way. So ask open-ended questions. Why is that an important strategy? What you're trying to do here is ask questions that require the passenger to think rather than to react to the situation. You're trying to bring the heat down. You're trying to get them to become more rational, to think about something and not just come off the wall. It offers a little structure to the interaction, these open-ended questions. It's not just boom, boom, boom. It makes for more of a discussion where it's actually a two-way communication going on, and it engages the person's rational thinking and or decision-making facilities. Now, that's all true, but I'm sure you can think of many situations when there ain't no way they're going to get to a rational thinking place. They're too angry. They're too under the influence. They're too stressed, whatever. You got to keep that in mind too, because that may determine what you're going to do. But you are asking the classic questions. who, what, where, when, and how. And why you're doing that is to clarify the situation, and you're trying to get the person to talk. You're trying to get them to talk. And when somebody's talking about their perspective, it tends to have the impact of lower them from being completely irate to at least a little more sense of rational thinking. And additionally, when you ask open-ended questions, you need to listen to the answer. Remember listening? Plus, you need to ask follow-up questions when that's needed. And then it's all about responding appropriately, using the right words for the right person at the right time, keeping that message short and clear, slowing down your responses. So when you know what the issue is, then it's time to respond. Right words, the right person, right time. Remember that when you're communicating with passengers, it's important to use the right words for the right person at the right time. Because if you don't, it can have a real negative effect. We aren't all robots. I've got to have some sense of what's right for you at this particular time in terms of the words I use. So right words refers to what you choose to say, how you say it, how much information you give. Right person refers to the considerations you have to make choices in your actions and words based on things like the person's age, the culture they came from, the frame of mind, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And I'm sure you can think of what that list looks like. And right time refers to waiting until the person is calm and not distracted. Honestly, trying to be rational with a completely out of control, irrational person, probably not going to work real well. So you got to use other strategies, kind of bring them down from the edge, right? And then you begin to use right words the right time. Keep message short and clear. In any interaction, important information is best given in clear, concise terms, not lengthy, rambling on dialogues. Tell them what they need to hear in a short, clear, and concise way. There's less possibility of jumping off on something or another, about confusion, what your message is, on getting angry at something that you didn't mean to say. If you keep it short and clear, you're saying less, and hopefully it's focused. And slow down your responses. It is not a bad idea to take a few seconds to think through the situation. Remember that most situations will get heated, and that's not about you. They don't get heated about you. They get heated about the agency's policies or service issues or about the passenger's personal problems. They don't get heated about you. Slow down your responses by pausing, taking a deep breath, or even counting to 10. Make sure you think before you speak and act. Another point here is that if you keep your voice calm, steady, and slow, it helps keep the other person calmer, steadier, and slower. And it helps convey your information more clearly. So respond appropriately. Offer help options or a referral. Big deal. This is a big deal. Offer to call and refer to additional resources. With this strategy, you can address the situation with offers of help, with options that the passenger can take, with actually referring the passenger to someone who's in a better position to respond to their needs. What this strategy does, it helps you control the interaction and aid in the problem-solving process while also communicating to the person that you actually empathize with his or her situation and that you want to help them. You know, when I really sense somebody wants to help me, a lot changes pretty quickly. It's when I don't sense that they want to help me that I stay angry, right? Here's some examples of how you could do that. I could call dispatch to see if I can get you information about that route. Would you like a customer comment card to officially state your concerns? I'm sorry, but there is no longer a scheduled stop on this route at that location. However, you can take the 20 bus and that will get you to the same location. Sorry about the confusion. You know, I don't have that information, but when you get to the transit center, you can add, there'll be a customer service agent there. Go up to them and ask your question, and I'll bet they can help you. Give choices and consequences. This strategy is a stronger approach to handling a situation with an upset or non-compliant passenger than others by respectfully communicating limits regarding the passenger's behavior and by encouraging the passenger to modify his or her behavior as may be appropriate. You're setting limits. Why is setting limits a good idea? Because assertive limit setting makes it clear that there are expectations for acceptable and expectations of unacceptable behavior. It also, frankly, helps maintain the safety of yourself and your other passengers by respectfully and clearly communicating limits. Why would you do that? Because you're trying to de-escalate the situation till it comes under control. But you're trying to do it professionally and not in a threatening way. So when do you set limits? You can use choices and consequences when the passenger behavior suggests that further conversation is not going to help. Won't help. It can also be used to end a conversation that is unproductive because of the passenger's behavior, or to encourage that person to modify his or her behavior so you can jointly work towards a solution. In this way, you are communicating limits to the passenger to encourage modification of behavior through appropriate choices. Okay. Following are guidelines for effectively giving choices and consequences to set limits and control the situation so it doesn't escalate. 1, state the agency policy, ground rule, or expectation of behavior. Make sure you're specific about the expectation. For example, eating on the bus, no alcoholic beverages, pets that are not service animals should be caged. Please stop yelling and cursing at me. And that expectation shouldn't be vague. You can't have that on the bus. No pets are allowed. You need to calm down and stop making a fuss. I would appreciate it if you would stop cursing at me. Present negative choices, then present negative consequences. If you continue to curse, I will not be able to help you. What you're saying there, you continue down the path you're on, I'm not going to be able to help you. Plain and simple. Because you've moved up the scale of escalation now, and you're really trying to stop that escalation before it gets completely out of control. After you've given negative choices, give positive choices, positive consequences. Always follow the negative with the positive. If you stop cursing, I'll get the information that you need. If you stop cursing, I'll get the information you need. So there we've got choices and consequences with examples, a strong strategy. So, combination of skills and strategy. Let's put this stuff together here. You can combine skills and strategies in order to diffuse a situation that basically you're involved in with an upset or non-compliant passenger. Don't forget that some of this is going to involve your agency's policies and procedures. 1, ask. What this really means is to ask a person to do something specific rather than commanding the person to do so. Most people will respond better by asking them. For example, move your bags. Move your bags. Would you mind putting your bags under the seat, please? Explain. When explaining, you're explaining why you're requesting him or her to do something. This is only going to work if the person starts to calm down. Otherwise, they're not going to listen to your explanation. It requires a certain amount of reasonableness. So keep your explanation clear and concise. I won't be able to move the bus with bags in the aisle. Present options. In this step, present the information in terms of what you want them to do and what they have to gain or lose. What they have to gain or lose. The choices you give will help make the person believe that they are in control because they're choosing their actions. The options you give have to be the options, however, that you carry out. You can move the bags, or we can wait here for a while. 4, confirm. When confirming, you're just verifying that if you have tried to resolve the issue, is there anything I can say or do that works for both of us to resolve this issue? Is there anything I can do to convince you to move those bags? And finally, act. This is where you take action, folks. And they're based on the choices you presented in step 3. If you've been a parent, if you've been a boss, if you've been a bus operator, you understand that if you say you're going to do something, if a behavior doesn't change, you better be able to do it. You better be able to act. So at that point, you're going to call dispatch if you have to, or wait based on policy. So 5 things to avoid saying. And you know what? I'll bet if you were here teaching this instead of me, you could think about another 100 of them. But let's just focus on these. As we illustrated by the scenarios we went through, the following are top 5 things to avoid saying to an upset, frustrated, irate, angry customer, as it will only add fuel to the fire and escalate the situation. Calm down. Hey, what's your problem? I just drive this bus. I don't make the rules. You know, if you can't follow the rules, then get off my bus. Blankety blank, you too, man. Avoid any sarcastic comments, please. The reality is sarcastic comments are going to be taken poorly and potentially lead to further confrontation and potentially dangerous situations. But as you add to this list in your mind, kind of put your own list together, and then what you do is take an eraser and make sure that those kinds of comments are not in your head when you're in a conflict situation, because no good is coming of them other than you get to vent, but then you pay a pretty big price for venting. Before we move on, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat feature and I'll try to answer one or two. Andy?
Thanks, Reem. And again, if our participants want to enter questions into the chat pod, we can have Reem provide answers.
If I know the answer.
Okay, our first question. You were saying, slow down my response and think about the situation. The problem is if I don't respond quickly, they will think I'm ignoring them.
Yeah, that's a very insightful question. You're absolutely right. At least some people would think that. So you got to hedge your bet. If you're trying to slow down your response to get yourself under control and to get yourself thinking clearly, it may be very important so that they don't think you're ignoring them. It's to say something like, let me take a second to think about this and see if I can come up with an answer to this issue. You're buying some time. Do you have any other
Excellent.
questions?
Yeah, we have one more question, and it is, you said offer a referral. What do you mean?
What you're basically doing there is, you're going to be faced with a lot of issues that frankly you don't have the answer to. And people want satisfaction and they don't want to hear, well, I don't know the answer to that. So what you're doing is saying by offering a referral is say, I understand this issue that you've got, and I understand you're concerned about it. And if you do blank, blank, then you'll be very likely to get an answer to your question, whether it's calling customer service or seeing customer service in person at a transit center, talking to a supervisor, calling into the agency, whatever it is. Offering a referral says you're not just blowing them off, and you're basically also really actually giving the agency a chance to answer their question and maybe turn a customer who is really actually angry about something legitimate into a customer who actually appreciates the agency because you initiated the process of offering a referral. Thanks, Andy. Back to you, man.
All right. Thank you very much, Reem, and thanks for the questions. And with that, we're going to move into our third learning activity. And what we want to do with this activity is to start to put these pieces together. And once again, this is going to be scenario based. And so this time we're going to present you with scenarios that reflect this conflict situation, but this time include an example operator response. And we would like to get your help in determining whether or not you think that that response was ineffective, meaning that it's definitely going to escalate the situation. Whether it's a risky response, which means this may escalate the situation, or whether or not you think this response from the operator was effective. It's good to go. It's the right thing to say. It's going to help do everything we can to de-escalate this situation. All right, so let's look at our first scenario. All right, in our first one, we have a passenger. She vents her frustration at you because you've reminded her to wear a mask, but she's having trouble finding it in her pockets. Okay. She's very frustrated, agitated. So in response, you say to her, hey, I know it can be frustrating to keep up with your mask, but no worries. I'm going to wait for you to find it, and then we're going to be on our way. So if everyone could please use the poll that we're going to post and select one of those three selections, whether or not you think this response is ineffective, risky, or effective. Excellent. I see the responses coming in. Very good. All right, and we have our totals, and everyone's agreeing that this indeed is an effective response. Right? The operator in this case was polite. The operator understood the frustration of the passenger, right, with his first sentence, and made an accommodation. Now, one thing to think about with this type of situation too is based on your own agency's policies and available resources. We are aware that some agencies actually have stores of face coverings. You have maybe a box of masks on vehicles or in transit facilities that are available that you can offer a passenger. So again, based on your own agency's policies and available resources, you might be able to add in a situation like this that, oh, and you know what? If you can't find it, it's okay because I actually have one here that you can take, that you can use. So thank you guys. It's a great response. And with that, we'll move to scenario 2. Now in this situation, we have a passenger upset because he says he wasn't aware of the recent increase in bus fares, okay? And the operator says, I know it's upsetting, but a 25-cent increase really shouldn't be that big of a deal. So what we'd like to do now is to have participants rate this. Do you think this is effective? Is it risky, or is it ineffective? All right, see the responses coming in now. Thank you. Okay, and it looks like we have basically a split. Most folks think this is a risky response. Some actually think that it is ineffective. And so, yeah, when we look at this response, again, the operator, at least initially, seems to indicate they're trying to understand the position of this upset passenger. But then with the second part of the comment, really implying that this really shouldn't be a concern at all. In other words, delegitimizing the concern of the individual. And also, something to consider is that, as an operator, really shouldn't be making comments on fare increases. Right? So perhaps an alternative response here to be an effective response could be something like, again, building off of those strategies that Reem's just presented, something like, I can see you're not happy with this fare increase. You can contact the agency and let them know how this change has impacted you. And I can give you the phone number of an individual who would love to hear your concerns. Right? So offering the understanding where they are, recognizing, valuing their concern, and giving them a solution, someone they can talk to, this referral. Okay, so thank you for your engagement. And with that, we'll move to scenario number 3. Now in this situation, we have a passenger who attempts to board the bus. And as they do so, you see they have an open container of beer. And as an operator, you're blocking the entrance. And you say, you aren't bringing that can on my bus. Alcoholic beverages aren't allowed. So if we could have our participants let us know how you rate this response from the operator. Okay, again, I really appreciate the responses. We can see that they're flying in now. All right, and it looks like we have general consensus. We have most folks believe this is an ineffective response. We do have some folks that think this is a risky response. And so, we definitely agree that this is not an effective response in this situation. And in fact, it could serve to escalate the situation, especially with an individual who, right, in this scenario, we're talking about, drinking an alcoholic beverage, could be intoxicated, could be impaired, maybe unpredictable. So in thinking about some of the strategies Reem's talked about and alternative responses that this operator could give, you could try something like, it looks like you want to finish that drink. Could you please finish it outside the bus? Right? Or something like, you want to bring that beverage onto the bus, but that's not possible. But I'll wait here for you if you want to go pitch it in that garbage can over there. Something like this to offer them a solution and let them know with a simple action, everybody's can win. We can get on our way. Now, if this were to escalate, you can think about additional responses you may have to give and thinking about those options and consequences that Reem's been talking about, saying something like, if you insist on bringing this beverage onto the bus, I will not be able to continue this trip. But if you go and throw that can away, we'll all be able to get on our way. Right? So calmly and clearly laying out for them the options and the consequences. And again, you'll notice in that last example, I've tried to end with the positive option. So great. Thank you guys again for the continued engagement. And we'll move now to our fourth scenario. So in this situation, we've got a passenger and they're getting upset. And they're upset because you will not pull away from the bus stop because he hasn't put his mask back on. And as he continues to argue with him about this, he wants you to get going, even though his mask is down. You tell him, sir, for safety reasons, we can't get moving until you put your mask back on. But if you have additional concerns about this requirement, I can put you in touch with someone. I can give you a number so you can speak with an individual who will want to discuss your concerns. Right. So once again, can everybody please select ineffective, risky, or effective? Okay, and I see the numbers shooting up. Appreciate everyone's eager participation today. Sure makes this training a lot more engaging. All right, and we do have a consensus. We have a consensus that everybody agrees that this is an effective response, right? We have an individual who has shown frustration, and in response, we've calmly and coolly offered a solution that would allow them to get the answer they want. We've involved a referral so that they can, if they need to, speak with someone else who can discuss their concerns with them. So thank you. And that wraps up our scenario, our activity number 3. And really just want to summarize what we've been kind of all the pieces that we've been tying together here. And, we've spoken about, understanding what assaults, we've spoken about assessing the emotional levels of an individual and having awareness for our surroundings. We've talked about the specific strategies that we can link. And so again, just trying to pull all these pieces together and remembering what is really critical here and what we want to take away is that fundamentally, as an operator, we want to maintain self-control. We don't want to give away that control to a passenger who may already be upset, frustrated, or disturbed, who may be able to, we don't want to let them identify and then repeatedly push our hot buttons. We want to maintain that control. And I'll tell you what, this is a lot easier said than done. And I think we can relate to that. We can have very, sometimes vivid scenarios and can kind of recall, oh yeah, I can see that situation in my head. But there really is no replacement for that visceral energy, that response and feeling that we get when we're in that situation of conflict. And we all know it, right? It's that situation when you can start to feel the hairs going up on the back of your neck. Maybe you get elevated a little bit, your eyes get a little bigger, maybe that heart gets going fast. The room gets quiet, or the bus, and everybody's focus are on these individuals involved in this conflict. And that's the moment, right? That's the moment when we have to decide, what are we going to do to maintain this self-control, right? And not add flame to the fire, add fuel to the fire, as Reem said earlier. Right. And so the strategies that we use, and we've talked about it, is we don't want to engage in that argument. We don't want to try to get the last word. I don't know about you all, but anytime in any relations I've had, professional or personal, when I've tried to make it a point to get in the last word, I don't think it's ever served to de-escalate the situation. Right. So that's a line that we don't want to go down. But what we want to do is we want to focus on assessing. Right. So looking at that individual, right? We might feel the hairs on our neck going up, but we're going to turn our attention to this individual. Right. Are they confused? Are they frustrated? Are they looking to blame somebody else? Are they angry? Are they openly hostile? Right. What is the situation? And we're going to look at our surroundings. Is my vehicle full of other passengers? Am I alone with this other individual right now? Is it nighttime? Is it dark? Where am I on my route? Am I just starting? Am I nearing the end? All of these aspects. And why that's important is that focus is going to help us to actually be maintaining self-control. We're putting our attention on where we need it to be, helping us determine how we can respond most effectively and how not to engage in any argument, any back and forth with that passenger that could escalate it, right? And so we use that information, that assessment of the individual and their emotional state, the assessment of our surroundings, and we decide how best to respond to the passenger. And we use the appropriate communication strategy, that set of tools that Reem's been talking about. Pick the best one in this situation based on those inputs and based on the common sense and experience that we have as a professional bus operator. Right. So being able to pull all those things together. So I really want to say I appreciate your engagement in these activities today. And with that, I'm actually going to turn the microphone back over to Reem for the last portion of today's training. Reem?
Thank you, Andy. That was beautifully said, honestly. I mean, you captured it all right there at the end in your summary. It was making me think. The ultimate test of what you just said, Andy, would be, I hearken back to my time at New Jersey Transit. You want a time when you're going to use all those de-escalation skills that Andy and I have talking about? You get on a New Jersey Transit train on New Year's Eve, coming out of Penn Station, going back into Newark, and see what it's like on that train. That's all I can say. So we're near the end here, and we're going to discuss the importance of recovering from assaults or incidents. And this is a very short module, but not to say it's not an important one. So first, you got to report all incidents. I think there's a natural tendency to not want to report something if it didn't seem that big at the time. And so you don't want to look like you're a wimp and you're reporting things, just randomly, willy-nilly. But it can't be stressed enough how important it is to use your agency's reporting processes and procedures when operator assaults occur, no matter how minor, and even if no physical injuries occur, no matter how minor, and even without physical injuries. Because not only do these reports document those incidents, but they help transit agencies learn how to avoid future ones. It's critical that you report all incidents to the appropriate personnel in your agency. And you've got your own policies for reporting. It's simply a matter of following them. And remember, it's in your best interests and the best interests of your coworkers and even your customers to follow your agency's formal reporting procedures when operator threats and assaults occur. Incidents that are never reported are oftentimes treated like they never happened. As a safety contractor, safety consultant, internal safety manager in my career, there was a lot of stuff. If I had known about it, either as your consultant or as actually the internal manager, I might have been able to help doing something about it. But if I didn't know about it, pretty hard to do something about it. So by not reporting incidents, you may actually hide problems. And these could be problems you face on a regular basis. And so this could impact not only your safety, but the safety of other employees, customers, and even the community itself. So please take the extra few minutes it takes to report any incident so your agency can respond to the issues you face. Let the agency decide, what to do about it, not you. And if you're a manager, supervisor, or union rep, actually, who have received a report of an operator assault incident, you got to take the report seriously. Follow your agency procedures for handling the report, then follow up to make sure appropriate action has been taken. That action has been taken when it's warranted. And please make sure you provide feedback to the employee who originated the report. And if appropriate, inform other employees about the issue. If you want to continue to get communication happening, if you want to continue to find out what's actually going on out there in the system, if somebody reports, you need to give them feedback. Because if they don't hear anything, they're not only not going to report anymore, but they're going to tell everybody they know, don't bother reporting, they don't care. I never heard anything about it again. So use the information in the report to assess what went wrong and why, and use the insight you get to prevent operator assault incidents from occurring in the future if you can. And I go back to my point. I'm not little Mary Sunshine here after 40 years of transit safety and security. There are times when you can't prevent operator assaults. You just got to react to it. And I understand that. So, getting help for yourself. Why is that important? Well, because you have to start with the reality that, if you're involved in a situation that's extremely stressful, you have the possibility of having some kind of reaction to that, which can cause, mental concerns for you. So don't be afraid to ask for help. Consider what help or assistance you may need beyond your reporting. And don't think to yourself, and God knows, I heard this so often. How are you reacting to this, Sally? Jose? Oh, I'm cool, man. Just going to go home and knock back a half a bottle of Jack and I'll be fine tomorrow morning. And then they come back to work and they aren't fine. And you can see it. And you start thinking they're knocking back that half bottle of Jack every night. And they didn't try to get help. And they thought it was a sign of weakness to try to get help. But they were so affected by the danger of the situation that they were in, involving an assault, it hung inside their head. So if you've been the victim of an operator assault or are having some difficulty dealing with an operator assault that you have occurred, that may have occurred to another coworker at your agency, don't be afraid to get some help if you need it. If you're in a bargaining unit, talk to your union rep, or whether or not you're in a bargaining unit, talk to your manager or human resource professional. Speak with family members. Talk it out. Even support groups can be helpful. And of course, you always potentially have the option, I assume, of using an employee, at least most of you do, I won't say all of you, an employee assistance program, EAP, or medical provider under your health insurance plan when that exists. Okay. But it's not just providing help for yourself. It's also providing help for others. Part of what being a human being is caring about people beyond ourselves. And so if you see coworkers who are having difficulty dealing with an operator assault at your agency, provide as much help as you can or feel comfortable with. If they confide in you, or you've heard about it through the grapevine, the inevitable grapevine, be a good listener to help understand their problem. Don't make judgments about them. Don't make them feel foolish because of their concerns. Don't make fun of them for their feelings. And when possible, you're going to, tell them, how they might be able to get help. In other words, make a difference. It'll make you feel better about yourself. It could make a big difference in that other person's life who could spiral out of control based on the stressful reaction to a life-threatening situation. And let's face it, that's what this is. Ain't no joke. It can be a life-threatening situation. So don't be the person who says you'll knock back half a jack. Make sure that you get assistance yourself if you need it, and try to listen to others and guide them towards assistance as well.
What I do to make my day better, I always keep a smile on my face and a positive attitude.
I don't worry about the time on the paddle, and I don't worry about the passenger loads.
Hardest job in the world. And I think one of the easiest ways to make it an easy job is bring the right attitude every morning and treat people the way you want to be treated, and not be an idiot.
To me, after doing this job for a long time, is to try to retain my humanity. Look for the good things in people that come on my bus. The young and the old, everybody. If they say thanks for the ride, I tell them they're welcome. I make sure they hear that.
I don't take it personally, like even sometimes some passengers, they say you some nasty things, so I try to ignore them and not to take it down to myself.
It's not personal. As much as people try to make it personal and try to use racial slurs, I just try to remember that it's not me.
Take your breaks when you need your breaks, because you'll need your breaks at the end of the line. Or even if you're running late or if you're having a bad day, go take that break, because it'll pressure off your system.
As soon as I start my job, until I end my job, I think about my family, that I need to go home to my family safe and sound.
Think about your family members, your loved ones, and good things that make you happy. That'll help you make it through the day and go home. Don't take the stuff home with you.
Get them safe to the end of the trip and get home safe at the end of the night.
Sorry, I just get a little bit overwhelmed by that video. I mean, those are real people going through this real issue out there on a regular basis. And, every time I see that video, I started to think that, maybe instead of Andy and I doing this training, we ought to just show a whole bunch of videos of bus operators talking about how to handle stuff. So take what they said to heart. I certainly do. So in summary of this particular module about reporting and getting assistance, it's pretty simple. Make sure that you report all operator assault incidents, even when physical injury has not occurred. I mean, don't just say this isn't that big a deal. Report it. Let somebody else figure if it's that big a deal. And don't be afraid that it reflects badly on you or makes you look like a wimp if you report something that could, in fact, be a reoccurring theme that nobody knows about, and which has the potential to go from something smaller into something real, real big and bad. Seek help for yourself. Make sure that you provide assistance to others when having difficulty dealing with operator assault incidents. Remember to keep others, on your mind, and get help for yourself as well. So that ends that module, and let's move to our closing remarks now, and I'll be brief with them. The purpose of this training is, I suspect, pretty obvious to you by now, is to provide you with the knowledge and skills necessary to effectively prevent, respond to, and recover from assaults. There are many prevention efforts that you and your agency can take to reduce the risk and likelihood of operator assault incidents. The challenge is to incorporate the prevention efforts into your daily routines, into daily life on your job, to keep an awareness of what could happen 5 minutes from now and how you would react. Be prepared. This can be accomplished by recognizing escalating passenger behaviors, managing your own emotions, utilizing diffusing strategies and techniques to decrease the likelihood of an assault incident. And again, you can't eliminate that, but you can decrease the probability of that assault happening. And please remember to properly report all operator assault incidents to the appropriate people in your agency. And now I've just got a few quick review points based on my own experience and some things that might be helpful. And you probably thought of them, but I want to reinforce you thinking about them. First, treat all passengers with respect. Everybody wants to be treated with respect. If they sense they're not being treated with respect, they're going to react probably in a negative way. You're treating them with respect. You're not really inside your soul saying you respect them. Those are two different things, but you're treating them with respect. Be aware of bodily signs of conflict escalation. Don't wait too late. If you believe de-escalation skills are not working, that the conflict is continuing to escalate, follow your agency procedures to get response to your situation and to do whatever it is you need to do to protect yourself and your passengers. Follow your agency policies, but don't wait too long. Speak clearly and calmly. Keep your voice under control. Don't be afraid to use repetition. When somebody's really angry, they're not thinking straight, and sometimes they need to hear things 2 or 3 times for it to sink in. Make eye contact. Eye contact shows respect. It allows you to really see what's going on and make decisions about the danger of the situation. And the upside is it helps you strategize what you're going to do. Make eye contact. Big deal. Employ that body language and tone of voice and words that we talked about to communicate. Communicate with all those. Don't think it's just the words. Remember, that's the least effective form of communication. Make sure your tone of voice is right and make sure your body language is right. Be non-threatening in words and actions. I don't care how ticked off you are. What are you going to gain by coming across in a threatening way? I can't think of anything, really, to be honest with you. So being threatening is just going to escalate. And so be non-threatening. I don't care what you're feeling inside. This isn't an opportunity for you to go through psychiatric analysis here. This is an opportunity for you to de-escalate the situation. You can feel angry, but be non-threatening in words and action. Listen to people's concerns. You're going to learn stuff, plus you're showing respect, plus it will help, it could help, it should help calm them down and make them more rational. Ask them open-ended questions, finally. Who, what, when, where, how. Let them think, try to answer. When people think that you're interested in their answer, it's hard to stay as angry. It will help slow them down and will help you learn. So, that's it. Thank you. I mean it sincerely. Thank you for your time. And thank you for all you do to support quality of life in your community. Thanks. Before you go, we would ask you to, if you don't mind, take a moment to provide us with an evaluation of this session. You can scan the QR you see there on the screen, or you can use the survey link in the chat. Again, thanks a lot for your participation, and please stay safe.